This is a interesting video. I don't really know what I'm gonna say in this video. I don't know what I'm doing really. I have a few things that I want to talk about before I get into this video. If you don't want to watch it, even though I think you should because it kind of just explains some things, I'll put the timestamp below and you can just click on that and I'll start the story then. So this is going to be about my experience this past couple months on my miscarriage and everything that entailed, and I really wanted to kind of like a trigger warning, make it known that I'm going to be talking about hard things, and sometimes it's really hard to hear things about other miscarriages or pregnancy loss or child loss if you've gone through that. I just think that it is important to talk about these things. I feel that if you've had a miscarriage, if you've had any type of anything happen to you and you don't want to share it, especially share it over the internet, that's your choice and there's nothing wrong with that. So in me saying that I think these things need to be shared is in no way saying that if you've had a miscarriage, you should be telling the world everything about everything. Things in our society are slowly getting better about being talked about, but it's slow, and in the past they've been taboo. As I think things are getting better, I still think it's important to talk about it because I think that there are definitely still things that can be improved. And part of my story were things that I think could have been improved. Lastly, I just wanted to make it for those of you that are going through this, are in the future going through this, just to know that you're not alone. It sucks. It straight up sucks, and I just want to let you know that you are not alone in any way. So that was a lot. Taylor made me coffee. This is only like my 5th coffee of the day. This is not a happy video, and if any of my jokes or my demeanor is offensive or kind of weird, it's just because that's how I kind of deal with this and kind of film videos. So I don't forget that it happened because it was absolutely terrible, but you kind of move forward and it just really like makes your heart sink to actually think about things. But I'll just get into the story. So in December of 2016, I had just gotten off the pill a few months ago, and I got a positive pregnancy test, multiple positive pregnancy tests that got darker, and then I got my period, which was just heavier than normal, and the lines went away before I could ever go in for a test, which really made it kind of weird and hard to deal with, but they label that a chemical pregnancy. So I had technically experienced a miscarriage before, and it was a loss to me after the fact. It took me a while to process it. Chemical pregnancies are hard because you feel like you have to justify it. I realize now after the fact of this one that I just was really naive to what miscarriages hold or what they entail. I thought that everyone was pretty much the same, and that was not the case at all. So I finally felt ready to try for a baby this past spring. We tried in May and got pregnant on the first try. Like, to me it was a good sign. I felt great about it. Like, that's not common really. It takes a little while usually. So I found out I was pregnant on Memorial Day, which was a Monday, and then my birthday was that Saturday. I told Taylor that week, told Beckham. He was excited about the baby in my belly. Didn't really understand anything because he wasn't even 2. So I was in a play at the community theater. I got pregnant on Monday, told Taylor, told my parents and Taylor's parents, and then I had a week of rehearsals and shows for the play. Friday night I went to a bonfire, and when you have a miscarriage, even though you're told not to, you search for things on if you'd done something wrong. I went to a bonfire that night. I was so worked up the next day that maybe it was the bonfire. It's just so easy to try and find reasons when a lot of time there is no reason. Then Saturday, it was the 8th of June. I had 2 shows that day. One was at 2 and one was at 7. I was getting ready in the morning. I was about 11:30. I was curling my hair for the play, and There are few moments in my life. I really haven't had a hard life. This seems kind of very off tangent, but it relates. The hardest season of my life was probably when after Beckham was born, when he was about 4 or 5 months, and then the first couple weeks after he was born. That was the hardest season of my life. But if I could think of one moment in my life that is the worst, that I've never felt like such a sinking, terrible feeling, was on that day. It sucked. I had a sharp pain in my belly. I didn't think anything of it. I literally did not think anything of it because I get cramps, TMI. I have a tilted uterus, so I tend to get cramps in my back or my butt and my legs. So I never get like period cramps in my abs. So I didn't think it was a cramp like that at all. I thought that maybe it was a really bad gas bubble and I needed to just try to go to the bathroom. I stood there and it was probably like 20 seconds of just a sharp pain of me. Like, it wasn't the worst ever, but I just remember being like, okay, like I need to take a second, and then it was gone. And so I tried to go to the bathroom, no luck there, TMI. And I stood up and I kept curling my hair and felt blood, and checked, and there was blood, and it sucked. It's like the suckiest moment ever. Oh, it was like the worst picture in my mind. I wish I could just get it out of my mind. But I know that it's part of my story and my experience, and I know that the baby is in a better place than I am right now, so I can only describe that moment as, like, you say your heart sinks. You literally just like don't feel like your heart could go any lower. Like you don't have a heart anymore. Like the bottom pit of like your stomach. You're just like, pretty sure I just lost my baby. I went out and saw Taylor and cried and could hardly get the words out, told him that I was bleeding. I called my mom and was crying, and I just didn't know how I was gonna function because it was 11:30. I had an hour to get ready and curl my hair and get all my makeup on and get dressed and figure out if I needed to have a pad on, like how big of a pad, like what. I had no idea what in the afternoon entailed or was going to hold, and I needed to get on stage in 2 hours and act out a show of a totally different character, and she's happy and sad, and it was the hardest thing ever. I didn't feel like I could tell anyone at the theater because I hadn't told them I was pregnant, and it feels really weird about an hour, a half hour before the show to say, hey, by the way, I found I was pregnant a week ago, but I just had bleeding this morning and I think I lost my baby. Like, you're not gonna throw that at somebody before the show, but how the heck am I supposed to perform in a play after I literally just lost my baby? So it sucked. It was the worst thing. It was the worst day of like my life, I think. I only got through the shows by like the grace of God and the strength that He gave me. I had no strength in my body to get through that stuff. It was supernatural. I had like very mild, maybe cramps, hardly, and very light bleeding. I was so confused. This whole experience was so confusing, and this video is gonna be so long. So by the end of the night, my bleeding had stopped. I had a show at 7. I had to go back to the theater, pretty much act like everything was okay, have a potluck, and then go back on the stage and perform again. I went home and I didn't have that much bleeding at all. It went away. It stopped. We both viewed that as like something very good because I know of people that have had bleeding in their pregnancy and didn't lose the baby. So we were hanging on to that. And then Sunday, nothing really happened. I didn't have any bleeding that day. And we thought, okay, maybe we're in the clear. Maybe that was just a fluke. So I didn't go into the ER. I gave myself a hard time afterwards because why didn't you go to the ER? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you get checked out right away? Well, my bleeding stopped, and so I called the office at 8:30 on Monday morning, right when they opened. Told them about it. Well, they're so overbooked, it feels like they are, I guess, that, you know, the doctor's so busy, I didn't get a call back until like noon, 11, I don't know. And all the call said was that I should come in and get my blood taken that afternoon for a quant. So I went in, got my blood taken, got a call at 4 on Monday that my levels were at 2,934. So they were in the range. It wasn't the greatest number ever, but they said that that was okay. So looking at that and the fact that my bleeding had stopped, they didn't get me in for an ultrasound or anything like that. They just told me to come back on Wednesday for another blood test. I understand everything, kind of, the way that things were handled, because I had a lot of signs pointing to the fact that maybe my baby was okay. But also, is it that hard to get me in for a 15-minute ultrasound to tell me that my baby is okay or not? No. And I know that you have lots of patients that probably think that same exact thing, but and then on Wednesday, my second quant went up to 4,656. So it wasn't quite double, but it technically hadn't been exactly 48 hours and it was close. That was probably the most emotional, other than the worst day, that Saturday, that I was, because all of a sudden I thought that I had lost my baby, and I thought my baby was okay. I thought, this baby's gonna live. I'm gonna find a baby name that means, you know, warrior, survivor, whatever. This baby's gonna live, and I'm gonna be able to tell this story about how much of a miracle they are. I just thought that I would see that baby. Because of the rise, they didn't feel the need to do another blood test, so they just told me that I should schedule an ultrasound. Well, apparently they're so busy in our town, they could not get me in until the next Thursday. So my bleeding was on a Saturday. I went almost 2 weeks after having bleeding during a pregnancy that I had technically had a chemical pregnancy in my past, and didn't get in to see what was going on for almost 2 weeks. It was just very unnecessary. This whole thing would have been made a lot better if I had been given some urgency and shown some compassion and the fact that they cared about whether my baby was alive or not. It's not that hard to double check. To me, that says that they need to adjust their schedules and have times in there for when they do have emergency ultrasounds that need to be scheduled. Like, adjust. So I didn't have any cramping or spotting all week until Monday night, the 17th, before the Thursday ultrasound. I woke up to Rock Beckham in the middle of the night. It was 2 a.m., felt terrible, and went to the bathroom in the dark and saw the blood. And it wasn't like a ton, but that was another just crappy feeling. So then 6:20 of 19, that Thursday, went in for the ultrasound, and this is where it gets fun. It was the most impersonal and kind of insulting appointment that I've ever had. It just was not okay the way things were handled, I don't think. I understand that medicine deals with a lot of legalities. There are a ton of different things in medicine that I, as someone that's not working at the office, don't know about. I have lots of family in medicine. I understand that whole world, and I'm trying to be understanding of them. However, so I know that like sonographers or ultrasound techs cannot diagnose anything. Their job is to scan and to send the scan to the doctor. But it's 2019. I know that my office was better than some, because some you go in and then you hear from the next day. I at least heard about it on that day. But for me, if someone is having an issue, the most understanding, compassionate thing would be for a doctor to be outside the room looking maybe at the screen that the ultrasound is on, because I had a student in there and she was sending the scans to the actual ultrasound tech that was employed at the hospital on a different computer. So she could have done that to the doctor. The doctor could have been in that room. I had the scan and I wasn't allowed to see the screen. I couldn't see anything of my body, of my baby, of my uterus. It was completely quiet. It was just so impersonal, and the fact that it's so invasive, but I'm not able to see anything, and I'm worried sick, and you're just doing your job, and I don't get to see any of the information that you're sending my doctor. It was so insulting. It was so sucky. And I said before, I know that there is a certain way of doing things in the hospital, but maybe some things should be changed. I keep saying it, but the most compassionate thing would be to have a doctor come in the room and have had looked at the scans, gathered their thoughts on what it is and what they're gonna say, come in and say, I'm sorry, but you've lost your baby, and ask me if I want to see it. Some people might not want to see it, but I was offended because I do want to see that. For my closure, it's just something that I find interesting to see, especially because I'm going through the physical, mental, and emotional pain at that moment. And paying over $100 probably for this ultrasound, I want to be able to see it. I had the scan done, it sucked. They told me to get dressed. I went into the other room, sat there, worried, knowing that I probably wasn't going to get good news, while in the other room, 3 other people, my doctor and the 2 ultrasound techs, knew the whole time that I had lost my baby. I got dressed, went over and sat and waited, and then the doctor came in the room and said, "I'm sorry to tell you, but it looks like there are just remains of conception." And that was it. And, you know, I'm sorry for your loss. They weren't able to see a sac anymore. I had lost the baby. It was terrible. So I got a quant done because they wanted to know what my levels were at, and it was at 8,552. So it was still rising. And I would have been 8 weeks that Saturday, so I knew that that wasn't a high enough number for 8 weeks, but it had rose from 4,000. So everything was very frustrating. I didn't have any spotting or anything that weekend. I went to a Hugh Jackman concert with Taylor. Monday, I still hadn't had spotting, so I got another quant done, and it was at 9,638. They called me around 1 and said that since it was rising, but not even dropping slowly, I needed to come in and make an appointment with her. Or I needed to decide between 2 different options: a shot to help me pass everything, or a D&C to scrape out everything. But I didn't feel comfortable making the decision between those 2 options, because even though I knew logically that I had lost my baby, emotionally and for closure, I'd never seen a picture of my uterus, of anything from the appointment. So I made an appointment with my doctor, talked to her about a few things that I was upset with, but I don't think I got my point across. I just cry anytime I'm upset. That's all I ever do. She showed me a picture on the computer. I was able to see it, and she actually got me a picture of my ultrasound to take home, and that meant a lot. By the end of the appointment, it meant a lot that she did that. I chose the methotrexate shot. I had to go in and get a quant done, and my quant was up to 11,000. So believe it or not, for those of you that might not have known, your levels can rise when you lose your baby. I decided to get the methotrexate shot, which is actually at higher doses, a form of chemo. I knew it was not good for me, but I knew I needed to get it done. Apparently, if you let the placenta or anything keep growing, it can become cancerous, and then you have to have actual chemo in high doses, and you can't get pregnant for like a year, and you could die. I mean, like, it's cancer. So it was just, everything was sucky. So I went in for the methotrexate shot that day, on June 26th. I thought that I'd be all right just going in and getting the shot quick, and then, you know, dealing with it emotionally at home with Taylor. Thankfully, my mom showed up. I'm glad that she was able to see that I needed somebody there when I didn't think that I did, because it was really hard. It was just really emotional. It just felt very final, and I didn't like injecting myself with something that I knew was killing off things in my body, because that's what it does. It targets rapidly growing cells in your body. It's not fun to go in and get a shot in general when you're having a miscarriage, when things aren't going the way you want them to go at all. Nothing went right this experience. That's what I kept saying to my mom, to Taylor. It just felt like nothing was going right. The methotrexate shot wasn't that bad. It was 1 dose, but they split it into 2 vials. I don't know what they're called, and put it on each side of my butt. That's where you get it. I equate them probably to like a tetanus shot, just like the pain and the achiness in your muscle. I went home that night, laid in bed. I had sore legs, and then I started cramping in my back. I took meds ahead of time, but the cramps were still pretty bad. I decided to just try and go to sleep and hoped everything would pass that night, because I was having cramps. I didn't even spot. Thursday, I got another quant. I really just had a tiny bit of spotting that morning, and then I started bleeding that afternoon, but just really, really light. And my quant was already down to 9,000, so I was kind of confused that it was dropping, but I wasn't having a lot of bleeding. Friday, so 2 days after I got the shot, my body was really sore. I wrote down that I genuinely thought I was going to die in the middle of the night. I had chills, I was cramping bad, and I had the worst sore throat I've ever had in my life, and I don't think I'll ever have one that bad. It was the worst thing. I thought I was gonna die. And then Saturday, we had a race up in Minnesota. I wasn't running, Taylor was running in it, but it was hot outside, and I felt so weak. I cannot imagine the strength that cancer patients going through chemo have, because it was the worst feeling of just, I felt so weak. I would cry because of how much it hurt, or just was so tired to lift my limbs and to walk, and I just wanted to lay down. But when I laid down, I was aching, and then that was the day that I really started bleeding a lot. Like a lot, with lots and lots of clots. Sunday I had bleeding, Monday I had bleeding and it was crampy with clots, Tuesday I had bleeding. It was very heavy for a long time. Wednesday I wrote down, feels like this has lasted a lifetime. It had been a week since I got the shot and about 4 days since it really kicked in. I got another quant that day and it had gone down to 7,907. I was hoping for a bigger drop, so I was really discouraged that day. But then one of the worst days was the 4th of July. But I could tell that I really passed the placenta and lots of tissue. It was like a very traumatic feeling. First of all, I thought that I would have a miscarriage and it would just be like a heavy period and it would be right away and it would just kind of go away and I'd be really sad and then I'd try and get pregnant again. No, I had bleeding and then my levels rose and I didn't have bleeding, and then I had to get something to help me bleed and pass it all, and then when I got that, I had heavy bleeding and then I still had to pass the tissue, as if it slightly feels as if you're giving birth. You can feel the tissue, and I told Taylor it was the most traumatic thing I feel like I've ever felt with my body. The thing that I struggled with the most was that I was not supposed to feel that until January when I had the baby. That's all I kept telling myself. I was not supposed to see the placenta, see the tissue, until I also had a healthy baby in my hands. That's what I felt at the time was supposed to happen. My levels went down to, I don't know, 400, I think, after that weekend. They went from 7,000 to 400. I eventually got down to 0-ish on July 25th, 8th to the 26th, and then to the 25th of July. That was the entire experience of my miscarriage. Oh, the biggest thing that I forgot to talk about. After having gotten the methotrexate shot, you cannot get pregnant for 3 months because it wipes out everything of your body, all of the folic acid that is built up. And so if you were to get pregnant right away, you don't have anything built up in your body, and that's what you need built up from the prenatals to prevent neural tube defects in babies. I personally wasn't physically or mentally ready to try again anyway. I still don't know what October or November will hold or anything like that, but I cannot get pregnant for 3 months. I know that God has a plan. There's a song that came out recently called Yes I Will. When I'm waiting, the same God that's never late is working all things out. Everything happens according to his plan, and that his timing is good, and that baby is with him. And I found a lot of peace and healing from it, but it was the worst experience ever. It was the worst summer of my life. So yeah, that was my story. Thanks for watching. Just know that you're not alone if you're going through this at all. I'm gonna make another video on things they don't tell you about miscarriage. So hopefully you guys watch them in the future and keep your eyes out for them, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.